Empire. The beautiful game is spreading.
In soccer specifically, you have a really interesting dynamic in that, rather than like in most countries, you kind of have this top-down approach to sports. Soccer was really almost built in America kind of from the bottom up.
That's Eddie Lewis, former U.S. national team member and founder of Toca Football, where soccer continues its growth in the United States. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. The future of soccer. Here it means one thing. In Europe, something else entirely, especially recently. Eddie Lewis continues to proselytize the game stateside, but he also has experience having played at the highest levels overseas. So our conversation was broad, kind of like how soccer is around the globe. Our guest this week is one of the most decorated American footballers, Eddie Lewis, who played in the 80s and 90s for the United States national team and had an extensive soccer career in Britain and in the MLS as well, and is now the founder and president of Toca Football, which is a technology-enabled soccer experience company trying to grow the game stateside. Hey, Eddie, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about Toca Football. What are you trying to build here?
Yeah, sure. So Toca, we're a soccer-focused experience company. We love the game. We love promoting the game. We lean heavy into tech to really blend kind of the physical and digital world to transform the soccer experience. Currently, we have two platforms: Toca Sport, which are soccer centers focused on our core product, Toca Training, which I'd love to talk about. We also run leagues and kids programs, and we have a new platform called Toca Social, which is an experience-based destination that launches this summer in the O2. Something we're super excited about. I think the best way to probably describe it is it's sort of the top golf for soccer. But at the minute, Toca Sport is the company we've been really founded on and has been the primary business up until now.
Get back to Top Golf then for a second. What is Top Golf for soccer? Explain that.
Yeah, so Toca Social was a concept we developed out of the Toca Training experience. Really kind of relies on a lot of the same technology. We've also kind of developed new CV technology, but essentially it's an interactive soccer experience that really is a cool concept. Imagine kind of a golf simulator, if you will. We have our touch trainer at the front that delivers a ball. And as you strike the ball into a series of different types of games, some football focused, some not, you really have the opportunity to kind of play with your friends and family this fun, soccer type game in this virtual kind of environment to a certain extent. And, at the same time, have a beer and some food while you're smashing volleys with some friends.
That's cool. Let's talk about data and technology. How are you looking at that being utilized to evaluate players in coaching and training? Sure.
Yeah, and I think to kind of your point, data and technology have really kind of made big moves into the sport. Over the last few years, I think traditionally soccer has sort of been behind, to a certain extent. Today you're seeing whether it's things like Toca Training or video analysis, GPS, wearables. They're all sort of making their way down, down market from the top level into sort of the youth game. And I think for most parents, there's still this underlying foundational things as a parent you look for in sports, which are is my son or daughter happy, right? Are they having fun? Are they learning teamwork, discipline, all the great things that go into youth sports? But at the same time, they still, they want to know, how good is my son or daughter? Are they progressing? Is this the best path, for their development? And I think while there's been a ton of information and data that's come into them. I think, just like in other industries, the same challenges exist, which is, how do I interpret that data? How do I contextualize this information so that it's relevant or meaningful to me? And for us at Toca Training, really that's a big part of our focus. Obviously, the core product and the training is what we do with the players, but we spend a lot of time making sure that we're informing parents everything that was done during that session, why it's important, why it's age relevant to them, so that they have a better snapshot on what it takes to either be a great soccer player or just how they're progressing as an individual.
I want to get some big picture soccer questions for you in this country, which you've kind of touched on there, but I want to start with what the here and now, which is the last year was unprecedented. What was your viewpoint of how youth sports and groups like yours dealt with shutdowns and a pandemic?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? I think in some ways it gave everybody the opportunity to kind of reevaluate what's been happening and over the years. And I think in soccer specifically, you have a really interesting dynamic in that rather than like in most countries, you kind of have this top-down approach to sports. Soccer was really almost built in America kind of from the bottom up. So you had these early days of AYSO and kind of recreational soccer, and slowly over time, these clubs have really kind of emerged into big players in youth development. But probably if you stripped it all back, they might not be going about it necessarily in the best way. So I think it's provided a really good opportunity to kind of reevaluate some of those things. And I think in the next couple of years, you'll see real big differences in making sure that players aren't overtraining. Games aren't just totally focused on winning and losing. There's a more holistic approach to what it means to become either top player or even top level athlete, right? Nutrition starts to come into the picture. Your overall wellness. Things as simple as sleep, which I think were never a part of the conversation, but I think now people are realizing, listen, this is more than just training an extra day a week on the field.
Where are you on trying to attract the best overall athletes to stay in soccer and not choose other sports as a potential track? How have you seen that kind of develop through the years?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been kind of an age-old question, and I think for certainly players in my generation, I think that was a much more kind of relevant question. I think today, you're seeing some of the top athletes in America choosing to play soccer because they're now seeing the opportunities, right? As the MLS emerged and there was a path to professional soccer, right? That was a big step in the right direction. I think because of the awareness of all the the international stardom and the number of players going abroad, playing for big clubs, now earning huge contracts. I think that obviously plays into it as well. I think it's a process, and if you want to attract certain athletes or certain demographics or from certain areas, you have to give them access. I think it's not something that's going to happen necessarily overnight, but I think there's definitely a much different view of what it means to be a professional soccer player today than it certainly was 20 years ago.
I wonder what your position is on social media as well, where there seems to be, it's unusual here. So LeBron James or Tom Brady or other big American sports stars have large presences, but comparatively to major soccer players around the world, it gets dwarfed. And yet at the same time, the really good American players through the years, Clint Dempsey, Josie Altidore, others, they don't have that kind of reach and presence. So can you kind of take me through what you think might be the gap of getting American stars kind of on that level?
Yeah, well, I think the reality is, and to your point, you have to be the best of the best, right? So I think, if you're talking about LeBron James, he's the best basketball player in the world, or Tom Brady's the best quarterback. The reality is the best soccer players in the world have bigger followings, right? They're they're bigger international stars than either or two of those guys. And I think that although they're not currently American soccer players, they're still being followed by all American soccer fans. I think probably one of the most telling things someone could do, and today isn't a perfect time because schools are still working their way back to normal. But if you go to an elementary school, just have a look around during a recess, and if you're looking at kids and the jerseys they're wearing, you might see an NFL jersey, maybe a couple of NBA jerseys, but there's tons of kids wearing soccer jerseys.
That's right.
And not just the local MLS team,
right.
Ronaldo, right? Sancho, like it's a huge audience, and it's not hard to imagine how that trend will continue to make its way as they get older.
Obviously, social media was not a thing when you were playing. As you kind of view it as broadly in how it helps grow soccer here locally or abroad, what is your kind of take on social media and its role in the growth of soccer?
Yeah, I think it's probably been truthfully one of the biggest drivers, and I think the reason is soccer lands in this really unique place, right? If you compare soccer to other sports, right? There's these traditional sports. Take a sport like baseball, right? Great sport, but it's a sport, right? And if you take a lifestyle sport like action sports or surfing or skating, these are sports that people really live to then participate in that sport. It's what they wear, it's how they look, it's how they talk, right? And soccer's always managed to land really nicely right in between, right? It's a huge commercial sport, globally, but at the same time, it lands very much in kind of this lifestyle realm of people love, wearing jeans and a jersey, right? Street soccer is, sometimes in some areas more popular than the Premier League, right? You have things like Pana and the 1v1. So you have very much kind of this street and lifestyle element to the sport that I think really lends itself well to some of these big platforms, like Instagram. It also, really allows for the reality of how big the sport is, right? So if you're looking for, great moments in the game or fails or, funny things that are happening, there's so much content that's being delivered every day from soccer around the world that I think it really just, accelerates the uptake for most of the fans.
Are you good with people? Maybe you're organized or have a knack for numbers. Well, then chances are you've got skills that could lead to a new career. A Google Career Certificate can help you get a foot in the door with top employers in fast-growing fields like IT support, project management, data analytics, and user experience design. It's professional-level training developed and taught by Google employees, and it's all online so you can learn around your schedule. Put your skills to work. Go to grow.google/certificates.
In terms of what you're trying to build with Toca Football, when you read the descriptions that were sent to me about the group, you hear like strong connections to the game, cultivating cultural experiences in and around soccer. What ultimately is your goal? Are you trying to find and procure players that potentially could become professionals like yourself? Are you just trying to kind of organically grow the game? Like, what's the mission statement of what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think at the end of the day, right, it's all about community. I think we have a really powerful product that does aid in player development. And I think we've created a process that, as soccer is a sport that's inherently hard from a technical level, right? The objectives are simple, right? And I think there's this romantic element to it, which tells you, hey, a group of us could go out to a park, we could set up a couple of trash cans and with the ball, all of a sudden we're playing soccer. But the reality is, it's, you're not allowed to use the one, feature on your body that's probably the easiest to use, which is your hands, which means everything is trained. There's nothing really natural about it. So, it takes a lot of time and a lot of touches on the ball in order to master the skills necessary to be good at it. And for us, we figured, okay, well, if everyone's saying, because there's so many other sports in America, or because as an American you prioritize education more than other countries, or because it's not inherently in your blood the way it is in some countries, kids just won't be outside playing soccer every day. So as a result of that, they're just not going to get as many touches, and they won't necessarily be as good. But so for us, the answer was, well, let's just find a way to get more touches there. And by doing so and beginning to opening these centers, what we also found was, people are looking for spaces. People are looking for community, right? And whether that's, as a soccer player or a soccer fan, a physical experience in a stadium, watching a game, or, like my son, a digital experience, hanging out on a beanbag playing FIFA, with his friends online, right? There's a longing for community, and both in our sports centers and in the future with the social centers, I think we provide this really killer environment that sort of blends these physical and digital worlds, all around the sport we love, but at the end of the day, it's about the people around them and the experiences they're enjoying.
All right, last thing for you. Because of your experience playing in England, I am just curious what your general reaction was to the idea that a Super League would have been formed, and the reaction from almost unanimously the fan bases, specifically of English Premier League teams, that they didn't want anything to do with it. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. On both sides, truthfully, I guess didn't surprise me too much. The reality was, obviously, it was a money grab from the ownership perspective, but the immediate and just wave of responses from the fans, particularly the English fans, I thought was incredible. And to be able to kind of turn that thing around as quickly as they did, and really make a statement, to owners and really the entire football community that this is still their sport, and I think it's been great, and truthfully, every player would feel the same way, as the fans. I think there was just a small group, truthfully, a lot of them, owners, sadly, I was embarrassed that some of them were American, and I think they understood enough about what they were doing from a business perspective, but didn't have any idea of what this meant to the sport, and how those leagues work, what it takes to kind of get to that place. So truthfully, I can understand why fans felt that it was terribly offensive.
Eddie Lewis is a former national team member of the United States soccer team. He played in the MLS and in Britain, and is now the founder and president of Toca Football, TOCA. Thank you so much for joining us, Eddie.
Thanks for having me.
On the next Future Sport podcast, for Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment CEO Scott O'Neill, the process can mean a lot of different things.
I think a lot of my peers are either thinking, planning, or should be thinking and or planning about how you leverage these teams, these organizations as platforms to do more.
O'Neill is watching his Sixers compete and being mindful of his own emotional health at the same time. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.